Hi everyone. Great to see you all here this morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is for you in different parts of the world. We always have people from all across the world joining us for these seminars, which is brilliant. Get to share some really interesting insights and have some good discussions and hear your questions and thoughts as well. So welcome. So this is one of our computing education research seminars for Raspberry Pi Foundation. I'm Oliver Quinlan and I'm Head of Impact and Research at Raspberry Pi Foundation. This is one of a series of events that we've been running on the theme of diversity and inclusion in computing education. We've been doing these in partnership with the Royal Academy of Engineering in the UK. And this is actually the final one of these sessions. We've had a number of really interesting sessions from different researchers looking at different aspects of equity, diversity and inclusion. And all of those seminars are available to watch on our webpage if you'd like to catch up on any of them that you missed. So equity, diversity and inclusion, really important areas to us at Raspberry Pi Foundation, and I know they are to many people who are involved in computing education. So it's great to be able to get these perspectives. Now, the format of this presentation and this seminar is we're going to start off with a 40-minute presentation. Then we're going to split out into breakout rooms on Zoom in smaller groups to give everyone a chance to discuss in those small groups for sort of 15 or 20 minutes what they've taken from the presentation, how it relates to their work. We always have a real range of people, some people who are really involved in education practice, whether that's in schools, in higher education, some people involved more in the academic area of research, and we've always got a real range of views, so it's good to have those discussions. And then after that 15 to 20 minutes, we'll come back together, have a Q&A session as well with our speaker. So on to the really interesting side of this evening or this morning. I'm really delighted to introduce Ron Eglash. He's a professor in the School of Information at the University of Michigan, and he's going to be sharing some really fascinating aspects of his work today. He works in social dimensions of science and technology, and I think that kind of dual lens, I guess, of bringing to this area is really interesting. So I'm looking forward to this session. He's going to be speaking to you about computing for generative justice, decolonising the circular economy. So without any further ado, I will pass over to Ron. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Let me switch over to Chrome here. And there's our website. I just put that into chat. Wanted to make sure that teachers have access to the tools that I'm going to be showing you. So I've started off with an image here from a recent trip I took to Ethiopia. I don't know if folks have seen the television documentary series Enslaved, starring Samuel Jackson, but they flew me out to Ethiopia to film this fractal looking church. And at the bottom, I found this beautiful staircase. So this is 1,000 years old, cut into stone. But you can see this beautiful nonlinear curve, just perfectly engineered, going up the side of this staircase. So just a little food for thought there to get us started out. All right, so let's talk about knowledge for a minute. If I asked you, what is the most delicious food, you would all probably have different opinions about that, because there is no one objective answer to that. It's a great example of knowledge that's socially constructed, but some knowledge is objective. So if I pour some fluids into a little graduated cylinder here, we don't even need a human being in the room. The fluids will just sort themselves out. You can't ask for something more objective than that. Now, when we talk about systems of knowledge, like computing or mathematics, those two things come together. And I'm going to give you a little example here from the history of geometry. So in 1752, the German mathematician Euler is looking at polyhedra, these geometric solids, and he notices that if you take the number of vertices minus edges plus faces, it always equals 2. And he pronounces that as this wonderful new discovery, and everybody celebrates it up until 1815. And then Hessel comes along, and Hessel says, what if I hollow out a little cube inside and make a little vacuum, a little space? Then Euler's theorem does not apply. And so a math fight breaks out. And some of the mathematicians saying, yeah, Hessel's right, we have to throw out Euler's theorem. Other mathematicians saying, no, let's keep Euler's theorem. And the pro-Euler faction wins out. And so they redefine polyhedron. They say the polyhedron is the surface covering a geometric solid. And that works great up until Mobius. You guys know the Mobius strip, right? Same guy, 1865, Mobius comes along. He says, what if I took two pyramids and I touched just one point to attach the two of them? Now it's only the surface covering a geometric solid, and Euler's theorem does not work. So a math fight breaks out, and some of them say we've got to preserve Euler's theorem, and some of them say no, let's throw it out. And the pro-Euler faction wins out, and they redefine polyhedron in such a way that it excludes this example. So when you look at Euler's theorem in a classroom, you think, well, this is a discovery about the universe, right? And it sort of is, but it's a gradual evolutionary discovery. And at each branch point, there's a mathematics that we could have had, but we don't. It's not that that mathematics would be right or wrong, it's just a different mathematics. And that's the nature of knowledge systems, right? Is there this bringing together of the objective and the social. So when we think about the diversity of knowledge systems in different cultures, we have to bring the same lens to it, right? It's not that one is primitive knowledge and one is advanced knowledge. These are just different branch points, different ways of looking at the world and accumulating different kinds of technical practices and solutions and questions. So I mean, obviously that's an oversimplification. These branches got entangled. But it's important to realize that biologists look at biological evolution this way. There's no primitive organism and advanced organism. There's just branch points and things adapting to their niche in whatever way is best. So what was the European branch point? Well, if you read Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, he talks about the pin factory. And he says, the pin factory shows you how efficiency can be gained by de-skilling, by breaking up some skilled labor into a bunch of little unskilled tasks. And so physicists pick up on what economists are saying and use this idea of efficiency to talk about the physics relationships between energy and work. And then economists pick up on what physicists are saying about energy and efficiency. And they say, well, de-skilling is just nature's law then. And engineering says, well, if you're going to de-skill, we can provide you with the tools to do that. So that becomes a goal in engineering. And it just goes back and forth, right? There's this co-evolution between a certain trajectory that's about extracting as much labor value as you can from humans, or extracting as much ecological value as you can from nature, whether you're strip mining or cutting down a forest or whatever it is. The more you can pull value out of nature, the better off you are. But of course, that can have pretty disastrous effects. And because we've involved science technology, we tend to think of this as the one true objective knowledge form, rather than seeing it as a branch point. There's a knowledge system that we could have, but we just didn't take that path yet. If you look at contemporary problems, pollution, racism, labor being underpaid and overworked and de-skilled, those are all problems stemming from extraction, whether you're extracting ecological value, extracting labor value, or you're colonizing someone in social networks with Facebook, right? You're extracting social value. Whatever it is, it's that apparatus of science technology that's been used to extract value. But that isn't the only way to do science and engineering. There's other ways of doing it. And of course, folks have proposed that if you got rid of capitalism and used socialism, that would improve things. But in fact, when you look at pollution caused by giant state-run enterprises today, it's just as bad as the pollution run by private enterprises. You go to communist countries, they're reading the same engineering books that capitalist students are reading. So there's really no improvement just by switching those kinds of political systems, as long as you leave the apparatus of extraction in place. Now, nature does not extract, nature circulates, right? It has a circular economy, whether you're talking about biomolecules manufacturing themselves in something like the Krebs cycle or the DNA cycle, or organisms giving birth to another organisms, or ecosystems undergoing self-repair and adaptation, right? These are all working in a circular form, what Schrodinger called negative entropy, negentropy. That's the way that nature works, and it's the basis for a lot of indigenous cultures. Indigenous cultures are often using these fractal forms because of its bottom-up emergent properties. So fractals, you might be familiar with, they're created by this kind of recursive line replacement, right? So you're replacing a shape with miniature versions of itself. You do that over and over again, and you end up with these ramified or irregular forms. And so when I was first looking at these aerial photographs of Africa, I realized that they were fractals, but I did not connect it at the time with knowledge systems. I was thinking it was like nature. It was a bottom-up emergent form, right? So it's like coral reefs are fractals or trees are fractals, that there was some kind of unconscious dynamics going on at the ground. It wasn't until I got to Africa and started doing field work and interviewing folks that I started to really, the picture started to gel in my mind of what was going on. So I would ask people, why do you make it this way? And they actually had an algorithm. They had a recipe for here's how you do this kind of construction. And as your village population grows, you want to add on circles within circles within circles in this particular way. And that was true even down to very small shapes. So here you have a stack of calabashes or stack of pots called a kumpia. And the woman keeps her soul in a little container. When she dies, they have a ceremony where they break that stack and her soul goes off to eternity. And then when a child is born, the soul comes back. And so in the first iteration of the child's life, it just stays inside this little woman's room. In the next iteration, they can crawl around, and so they can go out into the courtyard you see here. And in the next iteration out into the village, and in the next iteration out into the world as a whole, as an adult. So there's a beautiful kind of scaling symmetry that they're using in a very social, cultural, spiritual way, but it maps on to the geometric scaling. This is why it's such a profound process, profound way of doing patterns in Africa, is you're mapping these kinds of recursions and social meaning onto the recursions in the structural meaning, the geometric shapes. And I found that over and over again as I was doing these interviews. There was some kind of algorithm, some kind of meaning at the basis for it. This is the Ethiopian example I was just showing you. And sometimes I would go places and they would symbolize it with something like a snake biting its own tail or some kind of circularity symbol. So there was a lot of awareness. It wasn't unconscious as I originally thought. And of course, some of that made it through the Middle Passage. So if you look at the culture of the Caribbean, the Black British culture, Black American culture, you can see some of those fractal traditions made it through the slave trade. All right, so I've been doing field work in Africa ever since. And this is a village I particularly enjoy going to. I've been coming back over and over again because they make these beautiful Adinkra cloths, these cloths with symbols on them. And Gabriel Boache just passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately. But here he is getting bark from a tree. His wife is boiling the bark in these big vats, and then they strain out the bark. And that strained out bark is used either in compost for farming, or it goes into a sacred forest where it's just left to decompose. And then monkeys, birds take that biodiversity from the small sacred forest and spread it around, including places where the body tree grows, where the bark grows for ink. So you can see the circularity here, right? But it's not just circular ecological flow. It's a circularity in labor flow as well, and a circularity in the social system as well. So they've really brought together all these different types of value and allowed it to flow without extraction, without alienation. And you might complain, well, they didn't send rocket ships to the moon. Well, they didn't, create nuclear weapons or global warming either. So there's a lot of just genius that's in these indigenous cultures that we can translate, right, to the contemporary context without reducing it to some sort of trivial thing. We really need to be able to dive in and understand what it means to have indigenous STEM. What is indigenous mathematics, indigenous engineering? Not in the sense that we would have it, but to put on the lens of how folks are originally seeing that in the original culture before we do that translation back. So that's why we created this website, and I sent folks the link for that. So in each one of these, we've got a little background so the kids can learn something about where the culture comes from. Just because they're African-American kids doesn't mean they know anything about Africa, right? And then once they've learned that background, which we do through a kind of discovery learning, once they learn that, then you can have them run a simulation. So I can actually show you that right now. And can you let me know, am I still showing up on your screens? I see some nodding heads. I'm going to assume that's true.
Yes, you're fine, Ron. Yep.
Wonderful. Okay. So we've got it sorted by computing topics, by cultural topics, by math topics, whatever it is you might be trying to teach folks. Here it is by computing topics. So the top row is discrete iteration. And I find this the easiest one to start with. So the first thing you would do is click on cornrow curves. We've got it divided into grades 3 to 5 or 6 to 12. For the little ones, it can't just be a bunch of reading, right? You need something that's interactive. And so learning about African origins, first we just let them know, hey, all those cool cornrow curves that you're seeing, that's coming from somewhere, right? That's coming from these African origins. And when folks do that investigation in Africa, one of the things they find is that there's ancient images that we can relate to the images today. So this is a little game the kids can play. So I want to find this ancient image from ancient Egypt, and I drag that over here, place it there, and that one's correct, and that's correct, and that's correct, and that's correct. Yay, I did it. Okay. So we do that for these different parts of that history, right? And we don't tell the kids, it's not a lecture. You're just asking the kids, go to the website and then report back. What did you find? What did you think was interesting? So here's a little video of the woman who did the costumes for Black Panther. So a little connection to contemporary Afrofuturism. And then here's a science fiction book. Wonderful thing to assign the kids. One of the characters in the book writes messages in the braiding, her cornrow braiding. So I can write my name and make a little braid that way. And now I can start to rotate that. I can dilate it, right? I can play around with those numbers. So a very easy intro with a kind of immediate gratification. So the kids don't feel like there's this tough learning curve they're going to go through. And then we've got some tutorials, but I often tell folks, just jump into the software and you'll be just fine. So here we've got our little block space programming. So I've said to repeat this, these stamped plaits making up the braid. I've said to do that 20 times, but I could ask, well, what happens if I have 100 of those? What's that look like then? And you can see, well, it makes this beautiful little spiral shape here. And there's lots of different designs here. They can try to imitate, or they can just mess around. Often the kids have fun just playing around with these things. So if I want that to shrink down more slowly, instead of going by 93%, I can go by 99%. And now you start to see, oh, that's going to be a logarithmic curve. And just get rid of that. And I can go a lot deeper than that, right? I could do 200 of these things, and I still haven't run out of curve. So there's lots of just fun little explorations that the kids can do here in a kind of trial and error way. And once they've gotten their design, then you don't need to stop there. So you can come up with some math challenges for them. We have our collection of teaching materials here. You can do it like an art class. So you can have them do paper sculpture based on that. You can do 3D printing. You can do metal castings. There's all kinds of neat ways of using these materials. So we try to leave things open-ended enough so that there's a lot of discovery learning, right? So let me jump back now to my presentation. All right, so you have a sense of how we're presenting this as teaching tools, as discovery learning for the kids. And of course, we've got both indigenous culture here, but also some pop culture. So skateboarding, graffiti, that sort of thing. So we try to do controlled studies, so we make sure that it's actually having an effect. We're not just fooling ourselves. So we have one classroom using the same software, but without any culture connection, and then using it with the cultural training and the cultural background. And we can show statistically significant improvement based on the culture. So often when I'm presenting this, somebody will say, oh, I get it. So you're tricking the kids. It's like Mary Poppins said, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. It's like little mice and you're tricking them into the pipeline of STEM. And tricking kids and fooling them is not at all what we're trying to do. And I found that try as I might, a lot of folks, I can never get them to see the other side of this. So that's what I'm gonna focus on here for my, how much time do I have left? Within my 40 minutes?
Sorry, just unmuted. You've got plenty of time. We've got another 10 minutes, a little more
10
than 10
minutes.
minutes. Yeah.
Plenty of time. All right.
Yeah.
So here's Professor Audrey Bennett, my co-principal investigator on the NSF grant. I also happen to be married to her. We're in Detroit, and she's interviewing a quilting artist in Detroit and trying to figure out how she creates these beautiful geometric patterns. So the research part of this, which is also a really fun thing to engage students with, whether they're university students that are going to be creating simulations or just young kids, you can send them out into the neighborhood, say, hey, interview your local hair braider and ask them, how they do these designs. So one of the things I find is that, and of course you want to get permission, right? You want to make sure that people don't feel like their culture is being taken away from them. So we always start by saying, is it okay with you if we simulate the designs that you're making? Here's how we're going to use them, and so on. So one of the things I find is that often these artisans, will say, I don't know, I just come up with this, right? And so it takes some patience. You have to go through their process. So if I'm working with Native American groups or indigenous groups, sometimes they'll say, well, let me take you to the woods and I'll show you the plant that I use to dye this fabric or to build this a structure. And I used to sort of roll my eyes and say, yeah, whatever, okay. And gradually I've started to realize a lot of the computational complexity is actually in the ecosystem. And these relationships are centuries old. And so they have this incredible knowledge of plants and even, collaborations where they're putting compost into the forest or something. So it's taken me a long time to really, get the eyes for seeing this. And then once you've done that interview, you can then go back and start to construct a tool, a simulation tool that really reflects how the artist sees it. So you're not imposing Western knowledge on these things. You're going the other direction. You're coming from their ideas and translating it. So that's the basic process that we go through. And of course, the teaching process also has to be a little bit nuanced, right? You want kids to have a kind of anti-primitivist basis for this, but you also don't want to feel like you're sort of shoving political correctness down their throat. And so leaving it flexible enough so that once the kids have learned the basics, they can now import their own images and import their own ideas into this and express themselves in whatever the way they want to is very important. Sometimes I'll use this inverted funnel model to talk about what we're trying to do. So level one, you want the kids to just do some simulations, learn the tool, and then they start getting creative, right? They start bringing their own ideas into it. And often you'll see cultural mashups. So, you know, I want to use this Native American design algorithm, but I want to use it on Pokemon. And that's okay. You know, we're excited to see kids take these ownership of the mathematics for themselves. And then physical rendering, as I said before. And then the last step here is going back to the community. So you want to give back to the folks who generated that value in the first place. We don't want high diversity going into the STEM pipeline and the same old destructive artifacts coming out of it. That's not a change. That's just telling Google and Facebook, we're going to help your human relations look better. What we want to do is substitute the old extractive STEM for a generative STEM, for something that loops back and brings that value back to the communities that generated it in the first place, whether that's an ecological community or a labor community or a social community. So here in New York, we've got one of my grad students, he's now a professor, interviewing a braider. We have the kids create these simulations, 3D print the designs as mannequin heads, bring those back to the braiders, who said, well, don't stop there, let's keep going. So the braiders wanted to also have an experience with adult education where they're taking on these technologies. So this is where Raspberry Pi and Arduino, these little microprocessors, are so valuable. They said their big challenge, was in damage to hair. And so they wanted some pH meters. So we have a whole CSDT now, whole design tool lesson on creating your own pH meters and using those with products you bring in from home. And then one of these students has now become an entrepreneur. She's created her own organic, non-damaging hair products, and she's selling them. So it's really exciting to see that full generative loop complete itself. And we've done the same thing with Native American communities. So here using aquaponics, we've got an African futurist greenhouse that we're building in Detroit, Michigan. This is some different samples from different cultures around the world, showing just the huge variety, right, of these unalienated labor crafts. And you might wonder, well, why so complex? Why would you want to spend 6 hours beating something? It's because you're making that labor value visible. You know, exploitation happens when labor becomes invisible. You have all these people working for dollars a day and not getting much back. So by making the labor value more visible, these indigenous cultures assured us that you could see the value presented in the material. So in order to keep that going, we've introduced some artificial intelligence. This is an AI app that looks at fabric and can tell the difference between fake factory-made fabric and hand-woven cloth. So we're piloting that now in Ghana with folks who've been threatened at kente weaving. And this is another Ghanaian group. So we did a bunch of workshops with them, and they were pretty excited about it. So we sent them a laser cutter. So they've got, you know, grandma and grandpa are still using the old school sewing machines, but the youth are laser cutting these shapes using the simulation software. And then the two of them are benefiting together. And then in the long term, we want to be able to put together a whole ecosystem of these kinds of services, right? So you're getting ink from biological sources, not from you know, a huge factory taking petroleum and turning it into something that's going to damage the environment. You're using energy sources like solar. You're finding applications for that in schools and in health education. This is a little DIY vending machine that we created to prevent HIV problems in Africa. So we found out that there was not enough condom use going on, and people were embarrassed when they tried to buy condoms. And so by having these little do-it-yourself vending machines, you could have one funding stream where people are crafting the machine locally, and another funding machine stream for folks who are just staffing the machine, putting it in their local restroom or whatever it is. And so you're building up a kind of horizontal ecosystem rather than that extractive ecosystem. And I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. I can see lots of jazz hands and silent clapping in the background. Lots of appreciation. Really rich set of work that you're sharing there. It's really fascinating. So much to think about, and so much to discuss as well. So we're going to get into the discussions then. So as I said earlier, we're going to have 15 to 20 minutes in some small groups. So we'll go into breakout rooms. It will pop up on your screen inviting you to join, and you'll be sorted into a breakout room with some other people. There's going to be one person from Raspberry Pi Foundation in each of the breakout groups, just to help sort of facilitate the discussion and make sure the technology is working and things as well. I'm going to send you off into your different groups, and then we'll come back into this big group in 15 or 20 minutes or so for some further discussion. Thanks. Oh, great. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you had a really interesting set of discussions, and I hope you've managed to come up with some questions and nominate people. While we're having this session, please do feel free to post any questions or discussions or thoughts in the chat. I know some people prefer to share like that, and it's good to get a little sort of back channel going as well. But if you'd like to share your questions for Ron now, that would be great. We've got some people volunteering in the chat already. So Alex, Tracy has volunteered you to share from your group. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we had a couple of questions that were connected to each other, and one of them, we were all fascinated by the projects that was shown, and we're wondering whether some of these circular projects maybe were not successful. So what would be the criteria how to make them always successful? And the second question is, there was a nice diagram with a mouse, yeah, how it shouldn't go. And is there any alternative to that? So a nice clear diagram to explain how it should be done.
Yeah.
Possible, yeah.
Yeah. Let me, if you don't mind, let me jump back to my presentation. The first question was the criteria. So how do you know it's actually successful? I think actually this slide here is a pretty good one to think with. So we started thinking that we were going to work with these ink makers, as we started looking more at what was going on, I began to realize that thinking about it only in terms of the educational applications was just a very tiny window. So I wouldn't call that a failure, but by making a little experiment, you start to be able to see other pieces of what's missing. So I suppose that's my criteria. It's just kind of a trial and error evolution with lots of things that didn't work. So this beautiful little diagram here, where we're creating solar powered ink production. That I liked the diagram, but it was a complete failure. So the attempt to use a parabolic reflective mirror eventually worked. It took a lot of trial and error just to get that to work. But I didn't like the fact that you're standing out in the hot sun, orienting this mirror, and the reflections you would think are limited to exactly the focus point of that tube, but of course the rays go past the tube and out, and so you're constantly walking around this mirror and just suddenly getting blinded by some reflection you didn't realize was there. And so at the end of the day, we just decided that was not the way to go. So I can show you our. This is really more of a website for researchers and entrepreneurs than it is for teachers. But here's our solar heating for sustainable ink production. So this was this was the design that finally worked. Was this we used a solar panel that's used for heating water that was readily available. Lots of roofs in Ghana had these. We cut the top off of the tank, and then you put your bark and water right into the tank that would normally heat the water for your home. And then it didn't quite get up to the right temperature. You can see this is really bubbling, which is hotter than you would normally have your house water. And so we had to use photovoltaics to boost the extra 10 degrees to get it up to that simmering point where it was right. So tons of examples of failure where it just doesn't work. And that's true in the classroom, and it's true in energy production and economically and wherever it is. I think the engineering students that I would often take with me to Ghana on these trips, they would always ask the question, what are your problems? I'm an engineer here to provide solutions for you. What are the problems that you have? And I kept telling them, you know, that's the wrong way to approach this. What you need to do is you need to ask them what's going on, what they're doing, and get this sense of the landscape, right? And you need to show them what it is that you bring to the table. And then it's like a plant putting down roots and water seeping into the soil. Eventually the two of those meet someplace. But it's hard to predict ahead of time where the right meeting place is going to be. There's going to be a lot of sort of fumbling around and trial and error. So it's not so much, you know, having the criteria of failure or success. It's much more about having an evolutionary process where things are happening from the bottom up, and local folks are really able to be in control of it, rather than sort of imposing these things from the top down. So that was your first question. And the second one was about the mouse. So here's the wrong way to think about it, is to think about, you know, I'm just doing this to trick the kids, to fool them into taking STEM lessons. The problem is not that the child won't go into the pipeline. The problem is that the child is aware that this is what's waiting for them at the end of the pipeline. They know that this is in service to, as we used to say in the 1960s, the man. And so if you don't want your entire life devoted to service to the man, what's the alternative? Well, it's to change science and technology. So it's not changing the kids to better fit the priorities of industry, right? It's changing industry to better fit what the kids would pick themselves if they could choose the world they want to live in, which is the way we should be approaching things.
Thanks, that's really interesting. There was another question in the chat. I wondered what your thoughts were on, Ron, about the kind of technology that you're talking about using, like the solar panel and things like that, and the environment. You've talked a lot about looking after the environment. What are your thoughts on use of the kind of materials that are there and how they might be extracted from the environment? Yeah,
so in engineering, I got my master's degree in systems engineering, and I worked in industry for a little bit before I went back to school for my doctorate. In engineering, we talk about two things, the sink and the source, right? So in systems engineering, you want to think about where things are coming from and where they're going to. And so when we talk about our relationships with nature, we use nature in both of those ways. We use nature as a source. So we get wood from the forest, or we mine minerals out of the earth. But we also use nature as a sink. So we put our excess heat, you know, if you look at these nuclear power plants, you'll see this giant kind of hourglass shaped chimney coming out of the power plants, right? That didn't used to be the case. It used to be that nuclear power plants would just dump their excess heat right into the ocean or right into the river, and it would kill lots of plants and animals, but who cares? Look at all the money we're making. And gradually that attitude changed. And so now we have these hugely expensive cooling towers for these nuclear power plants, right? So you don't have to use nature as a sink to dump all your excess heat and your pollution. You can come up with other ways of doing it. But every time you do that, you're internalizing the cost. You're now bearing the cost of keeping things in balance. And that's difficult to get a corporation to do. under capitalism, it's difficult to get a government to do it. Under communism, everybody likes to pass the buck, right? Everybody likes to externalize their costs. So whether you're bearing the cost of health insurance for your workers, or you're bearing the cost of pollution for nature, you know, it starts with trying to convince folks to internalize that cost, right? And then the second part of this, which is a much deeper critique, is thinking about things that are inherently safe for nature. So you don't want to make some extractive process and then try to compensate for it with a giant cooling tower. You want a process that is ecologically sustainable from the get-go, so no adjustments have to be made. And so that might be something like getting rid of plastics. You know, we have all these efforts now to let's get the plastic out of the ocean and right, and let's, you know, strain microplastics out of the water supply or something. Well, if you don't use plastics in the first place, you wouldn't have that problem. So now we're looking back at what indigenous cultures have always been doing, which is growing the things that they use rather than trying to make it out of plastic or something. So there's lots of ways of embedding that awareness of ecological sustainability into the very fabric of what we do. And the line I keep trying to convince folks like the National Science Foundation is that if you teach it that way in the classroom, you'll get more interest and more participation from the recalcitrant kids. So the kids that are turning up their nose at STEM education are doing it for good reason. They might not have a particularly incisive critique, but they know there's a world full of bad stuff out there that science and technology is the handmaiden that's facilitating. And so if you teach it as the quest for these more sustainable approaches, as a quest for democratizing our economy, you can make a much better pitch to kids for why they should be learning this stuff in the first place.
Thanks, that's really interesting. I've not quite heard it articulated quite like that before. Yeah, really interesting, thank you. Ethel, did you have a question from your group?
I first of all have to commend the project. It's just something we have been looking forward to. Speaking from the African perspective, I'm from Botswana. So this is something that's exciting and it's showing some, you know, it's promising. So I like the idea of connecting what to prior knowledge, what students already know or what students are already familiar with. And it reminds me of Dr. David James's project. I mean, the way he teaches computer science in America to African Americans using hip hop, you know, something that they're familiar with. So I commend the project. I think it's really exciting. So what I wanted to know though is like, how then do you bring it back to teaching computer science concepts and algorithms, like things like variables and stuff? Is that even the aim? Or maybe the aim is just to kind of like say, you know, we just want people to relax and just be engaged into this thing. It's more like introductory, you know.
It's not just introductory, although I like the idea of relaxing and playing as part of learning. But we do try to make sure that the full curriculum is there. And so let me share that screen again. So if you go to something like Cornrow curves, let's go here. We call these challenges. So the challenge section is where we start to connect it to specific topics in the curriculum. So when you click on challenges, you'll see we have both programming challenges for the computer science class and math challenges. And you could even go, you know, further down. But here's the programming challenges for parameters. Here's the programming challenges for doing iterative loops. And so if you think about something like this, you have one loop that's creating the braid, right? But then you have nested iteration. You have a loop of loops that's creating the braid of braids. The hairstyle as a whole. And so what you want to do is make sure that you're fitting the computational idea in a natural way to the kinds of things that you do when you do hairstyling, so the kids can get a sense of ownership over that. And here's variables and so on.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Ethel.
It's okay. I was saying thank you, Oliver. Sorry.
Great, no problem. So, Chris, Tom has nominated you to share a question about accessibility. Would you be happy to give that question to us? Is Chris still here?
I somewhat remember the question, but I'm not sure if I can articulate it correctly. It was about accessibility for children from different backgrounds, and in particular, what is the English term? Is it SEND or SEND?
Children with special educational needs,
yeah,
or
exactly,
learning
exactly.
challenges. Yeah.
If you could reflect a little bit on that, maybe you have experience with that.
Yeah, I often have teachers tell me they're teaching kids with special needs and asking me if there's some way to leverage what we're doing to help that particular group out. I think one of the things that can be really useful is you don't necessarily have to start with the computer screen, right? So I'll often have teachers bring things in. Either they ask their kids to bring things in, or they themselves bring things in. And so let me just throw a little example on the screen here. So if we've got folks that are using the virtual bead loom, for example, you could certainly start with these virtual lessons, or you could start with the physical beadwork. And you can bring that in from the start and have kids have something they can touch and feel and manipulate. And that can be really, really useful for a lot of youth. Sometimes the teachers will do something. Let me see if I can bring in our teaching materials here. It's under photo galleries. So some of the teachers have the kids creating their beadwork physically and then doing it on the screen, or doing it the other order, whichever fits the needs and the motivations of the student the best. But being able to move back and forth between those different worlds, so to speak. So that was for that particular teacher. We've had art teachers who have said, I really want to be teaching ceramics. And so they're using the virtual bead loom to create a design, but then the kids are rendering it as these huge ceramic pieces. This is just using some little, they went to the dollar store or the thrift store and got just some little boxes of things and started just getting creative with that. These are, dollar store, you can buy these little glass beads and just set those into clay or something. These are old jars that are filled with colored liquid and then they're lit up from behind. So there's just lots of different ways of getting at whatever's going to facilitate learning best for that child's particular style. And the bead loom is just a really flexible way of going about doing that.
Thanks. Jane, you volunteered to share some questions or comments from your group.
Yeah, and first of all, I would like to say a huge thank you to Ron. Our group was we kind of really bowled over, and your resources are going to be used in America, Brazil, all over the world from our group. And yeah, it's brilliant. We've got 3 separate little questions. So that we had one question, which was, Ron, have you got links with other kind of the word is indigenous groups, or I don't know if that's the right word to use, but other groups from other traditions, so even Western traditions, or I don't know. So that was our first question. So that's one. And then our second one was around.
Can you hold that thought for a second?
Yeah.
Because it's such an important point, and I didn't want to lose this. My wife, Professor Bennett, really loves quilting. And so she's the one who really motivated this. But she started out with this G's Benz quilting, which is a African-American tradition. And you can really see the relationship between the music, African-American music, and the visual rhythms, right? The musical rhythms and the visual rhythms. I'm just going to play this quickly if I can.
We can't hear that, Ron, I think, because you've got your headphones in.
So that once the kids start using it, right, they start to see the connection. But you can do the same thing with Western culture. So here are some examples. I don't know if folks are familiar with the Appalachian region in the US, but it's, you know, hillbillies, right, the mountain people. So when we started looking at these quilts, I kept seeing this rose pattern with the little black dot at the center. And I didn't realize that was a symbol of the abolitionist movement. And as we dug more into our research, we started to realize what a huge amount of anti-slavery sentiment there was in those white communities, rural white communities, that today we think of as the heartland of Donald Trump, right? This is redneck territory. But back in the day, that was the anti-South abolitionist movement had its a lot of its core there. So when white kids are getting this material, you can see, you know, the gears clicking, right? There's other ways of thinking about whiteness, in other words. And we do the same in this case with 4 directions quilts. Math teachers really like the idea of having the axes because they're teaching the kids Cartesian coordinates and analytic geometry. So we just put together a lot of cultural groups that use those axes, and that includes some Asian groups, Hmong, and also the Celtic group. So if you think about the Celts, of course, today we think of Celtic, we think of Ireland, but at one point there were Celtic tribes all the way across over to Turkey. That was the indigenous culture of Europe. And just like other indigenous cultures, it was colonized, right? But in this case, it was colonized by other Europeans. So other than the cannibalism of Europe eating itself, much the same as other indigenous cultures. You have the sort of nature worshiping, ecologically sustainable tribes out there. So again, it's just offering these students a different look at what constitutes identity, white identity, seen through this kind of lens. So definitely important, as you were saying, to think about a much broader cultural variety than just the focus on underrepresented groups.
And I'm not going to ask my other questions because I think there are still other groups to go. So I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance. But Oliver, if there's spare time, I'll have one of the spares.
You can jump in. Yeah, great. Okay. Well, on the chat, we've just got one more suggested from Yotta about different age groups. Are you able to share that question with us, Yotta?
Yes. Hi, Ron. In my group, I will echo the comments of our other participants. We love the work and we got inspired by the work. There was one question around the age range and whether you think that the work is focusing on a particular age group, and how do you include younger children as well?
So the Cornrows site that I was showing you is probably the best example of that. So there I can revisit that briefly. So if you go to the Cornrows site, you can see that we've divided it into grades 3 to 5 and grades 6 to 12. So the grades 6 to 12, the reading is just a lot more dense and you know, much more involved. The images tend to be a little more dense and so on. For grades 3 to 5, you want things done in a way that's much more interactive and not so dense in terms of the reading. And so that's why we had a lot of these little things that you can, click on something to learn more about it, or the little matching game down here, right? So the kids really love, doing this kind of drag and drop thing. And I've noticed that, especially for the digital natives, the young kids that have grown up with these things, they're faster with their fingers than any other way of thinking. And so if there's something that they can click on or push or interact with in some way, it just will hold their attention much better than a bunch of reading. So we've tried to make sure that at least for some of these tools, we have both elementary school and then a middle to high school range. I think in the future, we want to make finer distinctions, but in sort of our first pass, we're just going to do it with young versus old.
Thank you.
Thanks. Was there anybody else who had a question that they wanted to ask that they haven't shared in the chat? Oh, I see Nada's shared a question here. What do you think of STEM versus STEAM education?
Yeah, so John Maida at MIT came up with that acronym of STEAM, right? Adding the A for arts. But when I look at STEAM education, what I've noticed is that they'll do something like, let's talk about the optics that was used in Van Gogh, right? Or let's talk about pointillist painting. Or let's talk about cubism in relation to geometry. So the art teachers think that by using something that appears in the Metropolitan Art Museum in New York City, that makes it officially art. And I suppose they're right. The art world can be kind of snooty. I teach in an art school, and I occasionally encounter this sort of attitude. But I'm a little taken aback by this. When folks introduced this idea of STEAM, they kept saying, this is going to broaden who appreciates STEM education. But it's certainly not broadening if all you're doing is appealing to the folks who love Van Gogh and cubism and pointillism. So I think there's something really missing in terms of our ability to conceptualize STEAM around indigenous crafts and graffiti and street arts and indigenous arts and a whole world of things that are not normally included in STEM and are not even included in STEAM. And I saw there was a question about an offline version. We do have an offline version, and if folks want to email me, it's eglash@umich.edu. If you want to email me, I can send you a link to that.
Thank you, that's great. We'll have to sort of draw things to a close there, but a great point to end on. I'm sure there's lots of people who are wanting to get their hands on the resources and try them out themselves, try them out in their teaching and things as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Ron. It'd be great if everyone could show their appreciation for the talk and content today. Feel free to give a clap, or there's a visual clap on your icons. Catherine's doing both, I can see, like double applause. Thank you so much.
Back at you. This has been a great audience for me. Wonderful opportunity.
Oh, great! I'm glad, and I'm sure there's lots of other conversations been going on in the breakouts as well. So, thank you everyone for your contributions and your enthusiasm joining us today. Just got a few things to say to wrap up. Please do continue with the discussion and the comments on the Twitter hashtag. You've got Ron's Twitter handle there, so you can continue to ask him some questions or send your comments, get some discussion going. Use the hashtag RPF seminars, and we can keep this going and sharing it. Do share on the hashtag if there was an aspect of this that particularly made you think or really inspired you for something to use in your own practice or in your own research. yeah, keep that conversation going. We'll be sharing the video fairly soon on the seminar's webpage. As I said earlier, there's lots of other videos there if you've missed any sessions or this is the first one you heard about. There's going back into last year, there's lots of videos there, interesting sessions on different topics, including the rest of the diversity and inclusion series that this has been part of. We're going to be sending out a survey soon just to get some feedback on this series of seminars, so that'll come to you by email soon. We'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to fill it in, let us know what you thought, and also, you know, how we can improve things. We've used lots of feedback and comments before to move things forward. So you know, I know we get so many surveys these days, but it'd be great to have some solidarity with researchers. Every time I get sent a survey these days, I think there's someone on the other end just like me, just trying to do some research, and they need some response from me. So I take a few minutes to do it. So please do that. Now, we've got a bit of a preview for all of you. You're going to be the first to know that this autumn we're going to have a new seminar series. So they've been going fantastically, continue to go fantastically. So we're going to have a little bit of a break for the summer, and then in the autumn we're going to have a new seminar series, and it's going to be on the theme of AI, machine learning and data science. So, you know, everyone involved in this field knows what a big area these things are, the impacts that they can have on our lives, and, you know, on educational technology as well, and on how everything's shaping up. So we think it's really important for young people to understand these topics, both in terms of the technical aspects, but also the implications. And, you know, just as Ron's presentation today has been taking into account that sort of rich interplay between different sides of technology and culture, you know, we think for AI, machine learning and data science, that is a really important thread to explore those different sides. So we're going to have a range of speakers, and you can see a sneak preview on the screen now. Some stuff's still to be shaped up, but you can get an idea of the different speakers. We've got people from Germany, Finland, the UK. We're going to announce some more speakers too, and some really interesting topics that they're going to be looking at. So keep an eye out on our blog at raspberrypi.org. We're going to share some more information about that, how to sign up and so on, and we'll keep in touch with all of you on that, so that you can come along and join us. And yeah, it'd be great to continue the discussions with you then. So we'll wrap things up now, but thank you ever so much, everyone, to coming. Thank you even more to those of you who I've recognised at so many of these seminars, and sometimes we've been in breakout rooms together and sometimes we haven't, but I've had some great conversations over the last few weeks. And thanks to everyone who's been involved in organising the events and getting it all happening, and everything organised. Lots of work goes into that, and they always run really smoothly. So really appreciate that. Thanks. So I'll say good evening, good morning, good afternoon to you wherever you are, and hope to see you in the autumn for the new events. Thanks very much.